Alright guys, this is my new 2017 TRX 500 ES, or FE. So this is a Foreman electric shift with power steering. That sticker tells everything you need to know. And I just picked it up for $3,000, which is a pretty great deal. It's the camo one, and this camo always kind of peels like this, but I don't really care. And a question I get all the time from everyone is, what do you look at when you're buying a used machine? So I'm going to walk you through that in this video. I'm going to tell you the things that I check and give you some other random advice along the way. So in general, in Central Florida, you probably shouldn't buy a used machine. They've all been in water and they're going to be rusty, bad axle splines, milky diffs, the whole 9 yards. I drove up to almost Georgia to get this thing in North Florida because it's not as wet up there. So I hardly ever buy anything used in Central Florida. If I'm looking at the advertisement, things that I want to look for before I even go see the machine, I want no snorkel, I want stock tires, one owner, and I generally want high mileage, high hours, high mileage, right? That tells you that it's been used, it hasn't been sitting for a long time, and that it probably works. So this one has extremely high miles. It has 4,800 miles. That has 4,000 miles, my Pioneer 500. And it's done 733 hours. So you can divide the miles by the hours and you can get the average mile per hour it traveled. What you really want is something that's been, used to cruise back roads. A lot of miles, not a ton of hours. So yeah, that's what I looked at. It seemed like a good deal. The four-wheel drive does not work on this thing, which we all know is pretty easy to fix. It's either the relays, the actuator, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to actually put the Knight for sure, the Honda for sure four-wheel drive system on this because I don't want to mess with the electrical one. And I have a friend who needs the switch assembly, so I'll give them that. But yeah, also, first question is going to be, why didn't you get a 420? Well, the 420 doesn't have a front diff lock. It has a smaller engine and it has higher gears. So the 500 is geared lower in first gear and in the secondary final reduction, which is in the back of the motor. So I'm just going to take this plastics and seat off. But yeah, so because it's geared lower, it's a little better for me with the big tires. Okay, so the first thing I do when I get there to look at the machine is remove the seat, just a little lever behind there, and pop off the airbox lid. This is going to tell you most of what you need to know. Okay, the lid is dry, it is clean, but it's not super clean. If it's too clean and you can tell someone just cleaned it, that's a bad sign. Air filter is intact, probably needs to be serviced, but there is some dust in here, but there is zero moisture and the air filter is intact. If you look at something and the airbox lid is glued on, walk away. Do not buy it. If you look at something and the air filter is missing, do not buy it. If you look at something and there's mud in the bottom of the airbox, don't buy it. Okay, so the airbox tells you a lot. Second thing to do is pull off the engine cowl plastic. This is going to let you get a good view of the engine and look for corrosion and things like that. If someone isn't comfortable with you taking a bike apart a little bit before you buy it, walk away. Don't buy it. They're trying to hide something. These plastics come off super easy. There's no reason a seller should be worried about you taking that off. So you can see this motor doesn't have hardly any corrosion. It does have some pine needles stuck down here, and that kind of makes sense for this machine because it was used on a tree farm and it has a lot of miles. So it was cruising around in a lot of pine needles. One of the bolts for the oil filter cover was missing. I noticed that right away, but not a huge deal. What I like to see is this engine doesn't look pitted and corroded. Mud hasn't been sitting on it. It's going to be nice to work on. It's probably been garage kept, or at least in a pole barn by the looks of all of this. The exhaust bolts are barely rusty. This is a very clean looking motor. That's what you want to see. Another thing I like to look for is, are there any aftermarket accessories? I hate aftermarket accessories, aftermarket wiring. All of that ends up being a nightmare, especially rock lights and stuff like that. I absolutely hate that crap. Generally, I will not work on a machine if it's got a ton of aftermarket wiring on it because it's going to be a headache and it's not worth my time. So if we look under here, we've got the factory toolkit, we've got the emergency ES shifter. The only aftermarket wiring on this thing is this wire. It looks like a battery tender or maybe a pump sprayer type setup. Everything's in stock. Rats haven't eaten any of the wires, etc. You could have checked the oil with that cowl on, but I just go ahead and remove it. Now it's a little easier. So you want to make sure the oil is clean. No signs of moisture in there, no milk. Look at the top of the dipstick, see if there's any milk sitting there. So based off of what I just showed you so far, this would be 100% a good machine to buy. The last thing I start checking is the suspension bent or the bearing shot, stuff like that. A lot of times if the bearings or bushings or ball joints are shot, I'm still gonna buy it, but I might be able to talk them down. So if you bring your floor jack, which is a good idea, you can jack it up real quick and check for play in the wheels, the ball joints, and the tie rods. And on a solid axle machine, you want to look for play in this wheel bearing. This thing is all tight actually, despite having almost 5,000 miles on it. If it's a machine that has the drum brakes, this is a good thing you can check. You get your, the one tool you need to do all this, by the way, I always bring a 17 millimeter to look at a Honda. All this applies to most machines, but obviously a Honda. So you pop open the diff, look in there for signs of moisture, and then you can take off this 10 millimeter down here on the brake drum and see if water pours out of that. If this is not milky and no water comes out of that, that's a really good sign. What's an even better sign is if it is a drum brake machine and the drum brakes still work. So this parking brake and this foot shift still work after 4,800 miles. That's really, really rare. So, you know, that tells you a lot about the machine, that either it's A, it's been maintained, or B, it's never been in water, because those brakes, if you get water in them one time and you let them sit, they'll never work right. And the rear brakes in this thing work great. The differentials have clean oil in them. The one thing I am gonna have to work on is the front differential. So let me show you that. You can see how this right here is a little wet. It's been slinging oil out of the pinion seal, so it needs a new pinion seal. So I'm going to pull the diff, reseal it, and then put the 424 shifter on it, and it'll be 100% good to go. This thing is electric shift, right? So it's got the buttons up here, and it's got the shift motor up front, but it's not a double clutch. I do not like the double clutch for mud riding. You get water in the oil, it can mess up the valve body, and they're a bitch to rebuild. I didn't really want electric shift, but it is nice that it has it, because this is going to be kind of a loaner bike for my friends to ride, and having electric shift kind of rookie proofs it, or idiot proofs it, because a lot of times people will ride my shit and they'll rest their foot on the shifter and they'll mess up my clutches or worse. So electric shift does make it a little more user friendly for females and people that don't understand how motors work. Oh my god, that was so sexist. Just ask Robin. Anyway, so look at the exhaust, look for rust there. This over here was kind of funny. I noticed this. This is the rear diff breather. It's supposed to be tucked up here and there somewhere, but it had just kind of fallen down. Not a big deal because it's never been in mud and water, and the rear diff was clean. That's the kind of stuff I'm going to fix regardless. But yeah, as far as what's going to happen to this thing, it's going to get a stretch, a lift, big tires, gear reduction. I may eventually do a center paddle. I'm definitely not going to do the stupid wheel paddles. Those are a joke. They don't do anything. All those things do is add weight and get full of weeds and slow you down. But everything on this bike, or quad, excuse me, is in the stock locations. The gas tank vent, it's in the stock location right there. So it's going to be a nice machine to work on. It's all stock, and for $3,000, I could not pass it up.